Our next presentation is making use of the Bridge Preservation Pocket Guides by Gregg Freeman. Gregg is the Director of Business Development with Kwik Polymers.
I'm going to talk a little bit about these pocket guides that were developed through the Federal Highway Bridge Preservation Expert Task Group. And the reason they came into being is kind of through these conferences. We all get together and lots of industry folks give presentations. Owners talk about products working well or failing, and we started to recognize the fact that there were certain technologies that had potentials, higher rate of potential for failure based on primarily miscommunication, all the way from the specification side down to the installation side. And this conversation bounced around quite a bit until it came up at one of our ETG meetings, and we determined that we were going to focus on four various preservation activities and come up with these pocket guides. And I'm kind of excited about it. I'll explain a little bit where how we started and how we got to where we are right now. But I think this is going to be a really good tool for everybody. These are the four categories we chose: thin polymer overlay systems, bridge cleaning, bridge joint systems, and removal and replacement of bridge coatings. And Mike Brown's going to talk a little bit more in depth about the bridge cleaning pocket guide. Those are the categories, and they were chosen primarily, like I said, because there was a greater potential for these things to go wrong, something to go wrong, whether the specs weren't written well, the contractors were following the scope of the specification, low bidders, not doing proper prep, not choosing the right tool for the right application, kind of a thing. So how these came to be is we chose subject matter experts for the four various categories, and those subject matter experts chose further experts, and we put these guides together, and the intent was to really focus on potential failure mechanisms, kind of come up with a checklist thing that could be used by an inspector, something that was also going to be able to be used by an owner to make sure that they understood how the specification should be written to control QA/QC concerns and things like that. The first one that we're really kind of almost getting to completion with would be the thin polymer overlay guide. And we sent that out to a lot of industry folks, a lot of state DOTs, a lot of experts, went through many, many revisions. And we're really pretty close. I think we're going to do a couple minor tweaks, and we'll get that done. Debbie Steiger's here with the joint system guide. That is very in-depth. There's a lot of information there, and we're down to really gathering some photos and some final reviews with that. Doing pretty well with the bridge washing guide, and you'll talk more about that. And then the painting guide, we actually almost threw that one out, and we went to the National Coatings Group, and we said, what do you guys want to do? We're going to probably throw this thing out, and unanimously, everybody in the group wanted to continue and move forward with the coatings guide. So we've got that up and running again, and we're going to break that down into three separate guides. Federal Highway had the funding to put these things out, and I'll talk a little bit more what that means, but GPI was awarded that contract. Initially, we're going to have this hosted online, and we're going to have printed versions, but we want to do more than that with these things. That's the intention, is to get these guides used, because I think they're going to be a really valuable tool. That's the exciting part. So, like I said, going back, can't tell you how many times I've been involved with a project where the contractor, low bidder, maybe has little experience or less experience than some others, bid a project based on the scope, the way it was written into the spec, not a lot of control regarding the quality assurance and quality control. The spec was maybe a little more broad than others, so there's a lot of room to cut corners, per se. Happens a lot. And then you get into the situation where the inspectors know very little about this as well. I think that's a primary concern more than anything else, especially with these particular applications, the inspectors might be freshly out of school, handed a spec, don't really know a whole lot about the application. They get out there, and they're just doing their job. They might sit in the truck, they might look at the spec, they might ask a few questions, but they really don't know what's going on. And I've seen some contractors out there that are very skilled. They've been doing it a long time. They keep their same crews out there that know what they're doing, and they do a great job almost always. And then you see a lot of other contractors that struggle to keep good quality people on board, or that, you know, have a different way of looking at things, might cut corners just because they don't understand it. Also work with a lot of maintenance crews that need training and education. We have a lot of outreach programs to get out to the local agencies and get them more involved in this stuff too. So like I said, we want to have a format that's easy to follow, that you can look at the beginning, you can assess the situation, whether you're on the design side and you want to make sure you have a good specification, or you want to make sure your inspectors have a tool. Ultimately, I thought that you could use these things as a checklist, and this is kind of long-term possibility. Your inspectors could actually use these as a tool, and if we move forward with this application, which is something that hopefully will happen in the future, they could use this tool, go through the checklist, sign the document, keep it on file. But either way, I think these particular pocket guides have a lot of very, very valuable information. I haven't seen it presented in this type of a format before that's gone through a lot of extensive review, and I think it's going to be, they're all going to be really a very good tool if they're used. That's another topic that we're going to get into. Like I said, the first one's the thin polymer overlay guide, and so I'll give you a little more information as far as what that's going to look like. I'm not going to get into all the bits of information here. In fact, I can't even read that. I have to get out my reading glasses. But this is what the contents look like. And so, like I said, it is pretty much like a checklist format. It goes through everything. If you're an inspector, you could pretty much take this guide, and hopefully in the format of an app, but if not, you can look at it online, and you can go through everything from preview to surface prep through mixing. With the thin polymer overlay guides, I'm getting some comments from contractors finally, good points being made. There's a lot of various automated components to this now. As things move forward, we've got people mixing with pumps, broadcasting aggregate, things like that, trying to, in some situations, getting away from squeegees. The intent was to look at the worst case scenario. Where are the potential for failure mechanisms? We want to catch those, and we want to catch them all, and we want to bring awareness to what can go wrong in these applications. And so the thin overlay is almost done. It's looking good, and I think we've done a really good job. And if there's anybody in this room that considers themselves with some level of expertise that has not yet looked at these, we're open to sharing them, before we go through our very final, pressing, or so to speak, or whatever. If you're interested in looking at any of these, you're welcome to take a look and provide some advice. We do get involved in the front end as well, as far as talking about what is a thin polymer overlay. That language is thrown around loosely: concrete overlay, polymer overlay, thin overlay, epoxy overlay, whatever. We want to kind of define it a little bit, a polymer resin binder with some aggregate broadcast into it. What are you using it for? What's the intent of the system? We want to prevent the intrusion of moisture, chlorides, de-icing chemicals, provide a kind of a higher friction wearing course that's maybe better than what was there before. So we want everyone to understand what the intent is often, and I've seen these things oversold in many situations. It's really about making sure that the right system is used for the right application. Are you agree? And we did get into some kind of back and forth. We did have some industry folks involved as well, and I think that's important. I'm not the only industry person that has something to say about this, and I think there was a lot of back and forth when we started talking about condition assessment, there was a big section in there at the beginning when we got started about making sure that, from my perspective, it might have been a little conservative. And then even talking to some of the states that have acted more liberally in determining if their particular bridge deck was a good candidate for a thin polymer overlay, that have had a fairly high level of success. So we came in more broadly. Now, if you look at these two photographs, I would say that those are not candidates for thin overlay, but they were used for thin overlay. And we had some issues. I've seen a lot of scenarios out there, and I think when we all came together from the industry side and the subject matter experts all got together and we went through a lot of different reviews, we really did kind of narrow it down without being too specific. There's some tools out there. We do have some links for some other sources that provide other more specific guidelines regarding condition assessment for a thin polymer overlay. I think they're good tools and worthy of looking into if you're an owner and considering these overlay systems. And then the checklist is very extensive, and here again, I can't tell you how many projects I've been on, and I often provided training on these projects and also provided the contractors with a list of things to provide or to bring. Very, very rare that the contractor did show up with the tools and the equipment that I was suggested. And as you guys know, a lot of these applications are done in more rural places. I've had some interesting comments from contractors that have not shown up with the right equipment when I suggested, what are we going to do now? And they had their certain window when they expected to get it done, and they weren't really willing. So actually, I usually brought a mixer with me. That was the one thing that I always brought, and a timer. But anyway, here's a good list of things. Also talking about prep in the application checklist. It's pretty extensive. Please take a look if you're interested in seeing it before we put the final version out. It's pretty much almost done, 99.9% complete. Debbie and her group did a fabulous job with the joint system. It's very extensive. It's another system that I see a lot of finger pointing, why are we having issues? Because there's a lot of variables when choosing the right system, the type of movement, doing it properly, and it's another kind of potential for failure. Joint systems are important. They're part of the roof of the structure to protect the whole structure, and it's critical that they're installed and maintained properly. And they did a great job and got it to depth, almost to the point where it was, there's too much information here. But we went back and forth and looked at all the information that was there, and we decided that most of this information is going to be used online. No one's going to be carrying these documents all around in print form, so we don't have to worry about that. Ultimately, we hope to have an app, which is going to be carried around on your phone. So the more information, the better, as long as it's not confusing. And I think they did a great job. There's a lot of information in the front end, so you can kind of narrow it down and you don't just have to read the whole document, wouldn't you say? The types of joints and defined by movement and ratings, and checklist by rankings, and get into the minute details of the application methods, and they even get into some of the maintenance stuff as well. I think this is another really good tool. Really with a focus on potential, where's the greatest potential for problems, whether it's on the specification side, choosing the right joint system, the application side, trying to minimize potential for failure of these systems. And then again, like I said, I haven't seen anything like this. It's going to be great. The other thing, I don't want to steal Michael's thunder on the bridge cleaning guide, but this is a particular technology, and when we first looked at these pocket guides and it was suggested we throw bridge cleaning in there, I was kind of like, well, why do we need a checklist? But really, this particular guide is not as much of a checklist as kind of trying to reach out to a lot of the state DOTs. We do and have realized that bridge cleaning is a highly effective preservation activity. A lot of states haven't taken the time to determine what kind of hoops they need to jump through, what kind of information is out there to kind of clarify how valuable and what the advantages are of cleaning your bridges, even just for the inspection aspect of it, yet alone for the preservation aspect of it. And there were a lot of questions then some states weren't willing to even take the time to get into. So I think once it's clarified how valuable keeping your bridges cleaned and on a regular basis and what that means, this guide is not going to get into debris removal and maybe not too much into vegetation growth, but just basic cleaning. A lot of work was done, and like I said, I don't want to get too much into it because we've got a full presentation about this. But this is kind of an overview, which Mike presented to us at the last ETG meeting, and I just kind of took his bullet points from this. We do have some contractors represented here that do bridge cleaning. It was hard to find people, experts that have field experience. There's a lot of information out there as far as some research and work that's been done from that perspective, but to get a contractor's perspective, we're trying to bring a little bit more of that in before it's all finalized. The other one, like I said, the coatings guide, which I thought because which we thought as a whole group, and pretty much determined that we were just going to walk away from this whole thing, it really did make a full circle. And even though there are a lot of guides out there for various methods of coating and painting bridges, it was determined that we could offer something unique and special. And like I said, once we get it down into more of a checklist kind of a thing that can be used by designers, inspectors, and contractors. Often contractors have to be trained extensively to do this kind of work. But anyway, apparently this is very critical that we went ahead and finished this. So we did break it down into 3 groups. The first one was removal and replacement of coatings, pretty extensive. There's a lot of information. Here's an overview of what this is going to include. Basically removal, prep, and replacement. There is a kind of a rule of thumb out there about when you see 10% of the coating is starting to show signs of corrosion. Raj mentioned that we're not out here trying to say what some states are doing, but this is more meant to be just kind of a rule of thumb. Apparently, various industry groups have certain rules of thumb that we use, and this is one. So that's kind of the broad basis for the coating guide. This is very well just for one of 3 of the initial first coating guide. We've got some buy-in. I would say maybe this particular guide is not as far along as some of the other ones. It will be a good tool if you look through the contents here. It's going to be a lot of information in this particular guide. So here again, I think this is going to be a great guide. The biggest thing, which I've seen with a lot of this kind of stuff, and the thing that I wanted to make sure was really considered an important aspect of these things, if we're going to take the time to develop them, we're already over a year into this, and it might be a little while longer before they get out and about and they're being used, is to make sure that they do get used, and make sure that the value of these things is seen. And there's other efforts going on. We're trying to coordinate with what AASHTO's doing, the TSP2 program, the regional partnerships, the local agency outreach, and the BPEGG efforts and action items. Try to get the industry folks to get out and understand how these guides can be a benefit for them, how you can get out and meet some of the folks, whether it's design people that you want to go meet anyway. The industry people want to get out in front of the decision makers at the DOT. You want to make sure your products are installed properly. I think this is the most important thing that we can do as industry, is to get out, understand these tools, share them with the right people that can use them, make sure they understand how valuable they can be. That's really important. We may have some videos down the road, and hopefully we will have a phone app. That's all I can say right now as far as that goes. What's next? We do want to have a sealer guide, another item. And then as far as the other two bridge coating guides, spot repair of bridge coatings and overcoating of bridge coatings. So those are the other two as they relate to bridge coatings. And again, like I said, if anyone feels they have some expertise they want to add to our working group, and please reach out, and we'd be happy to include your input, or get you involved in the review process. The biggest thing is the implementation plan, and have as many people see the value in these pocket guides, get them out to the folks that can use these things, especially as it gets down to the inspectors. If you look at all the potential, the miscommunication components of why we're developing these, the inspectors are critical as well, and I've been hearing for years and years, we want to train inspectors, the owners are having trouble getting the inspectors in, and the industry is having trouble getting the inspectors together. I think we should really try to do that. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.